Yes, or we good on your end too?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'd like to call to order the September 10th, 2025 special meeting of the South Burlington School Board. Our first agenda item is a projected executive session. I would entertain a motion to find that premature public disclosure of what we're going to talk about, which is employment of a public officer employee, receiving confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal service to the board, and labor negotiations update would place the board at a significant disadvantage.
Second motion.
Or somebody has to move that. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 And we're gonna do a roll call just because we have a couple of remote people. So, Austin, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes. Michelle, how do you vote?
Yes.
Dan, how do you vote? We couldn't hear Dan. All right, well, let's switch to Emily. Emily, how do you vote?
They said yes in the chat. Their mic is not.
Oh, Emily, your mic is not working. All right, we need to wait on this. We need to hear from, Dan, and I'm just gonna call Emily.
Is this recording sufficient? That we have Emily up in the chat?
I would rather have her say it out loud. Oh, well, let's see, one, two, Michelle, you,
School.
yeah, I know.
Too hard.
You do it as well.
I am, yeah.
All right, so,
Yeah,
so we just, yeah, we're gonna let the motion die.
Yes.
I'm gonna call Emily so that we have her voice. And then Michelle, for some reason, we can hear you, but not Dan. All right, so first I'm calling Emily. Hi, Emily.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, okay. All right,
Maybe
so I'm
the
gonna start-
speakers on this.
I'm gonna start over. We're gonna let the motion fail. So I would entertain a motion to find that premature public knowledge of what we're going to discuss in executive session, namely employment of a public officer or employee, receiving confidential attorney-client communication for the purpose of providing legal services to the board, and or labor negotiations would put the school district at a significant disadvantage. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. We're gonna actually do this roll call. Laura,
Aye.
Austin,
Aye.
Michelle. Emily,
Aye.
Seamus, aye. So that's 4. So the motion passes. I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session.
I move to enter into executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, and then we'll do another roll call. Laura,
Aye.
Austin,
Aye.
Emily,
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Okay, great. So the motion passes and we are now in executive session. And coming into executive session with us are Kristen Romick, acting superintendent, Mick Letty, district council, and that's who we know of so far, who will definitely be called into executive session. And if there's anybody else, I will say that when we get back from executive session. All right, thank you.
Ready to start the meeting?
Yes.
We looking to go live?
Yes, please. All right. So I'd like to call the September 10th, 2025 special meeting of the South Burlington School Board back into order. We just got out of executive session. And Kristen and Nick. Kristen, our acting superintendent, and Mick Letty, district council, were the ones who joined us in executive session. So the first item on our agenda is announcements and amendments to the agenda. Do we have any announcements or amendments to the agenda?
In consent agenda, I'll need to make another switch, so just so that you know that's coming.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. Any other announcements or amendments? Great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is comments from the public. And this is an opportunity to talk about any topic. And you are encouraged to, for example, mention anything that is on the agenda. You're allowed to talk about that also. Once we finish this section on public comment, the only other time that we'll be taking public comment during the meeting is during action items. And we do have one action item tonight, which will be around the interim superintendent. So, anyway, please, if you have public comment, let us know. Do we have anybody online, their hands raised? All right.
Morning.
Great. Okay, our next item on the agenda is focus on student learning, our student representative report, so. Alden, I'll turn it over to you.
As students continue to adjust back into their school schedule, parents might be looking for opportunities to get involved in their children's education. So if any parents would like to contribute to enhancing the sense of the school community in South Burlington, think about joining your child's school PTO or booster program. More information on each school's PTO and meeting days can be found on the school website. International Dot Day is coming up Monday, September 15th. Many South Burlington schools celebrate International Dot Day, which is named after Peter Reynolds' book, The Dot, which encourages creativity. Students at all schools are welcome to wear any clothing they have with dots and might participate in dot themed activities that day. Then high school sports photos were last week and will continue to roll into this week. For any sports players, if you're unsure when your photos will be, your coaches can provide more information. And we want to give a big thank you to Mr. Gordon for taking the time to take all the team's photos. That's it.
When is start day?
It is September 15th.
Excellent, thank you very much. So the next item on our agenda is an action item on the interim superintendent search. So the board has chosen Dr. Joe Clark as our next superintendent. I just want to read out a couple quotes from his last 3 school districts. In Nordonia, Ohio, where he was the longest serving superintendent, about 12 or 14 years. The current superintendent in Nordonia sent in a note to say, Dr. Clark leads with humility and purpose. I am a better leader because of his example, and I recommend him without hesitation. That's the current superintendent in Nordonia. In Westerville, which is another district that Dr. Clark served in, I talked to a football coach, and the football coach said, I would have him back as a superintendent, and unlike previous superintendents, I could actually talk to him. And then at Waterloo, which was Dr. Clark's last district before he came to us, I contacted their board chair, and I finally got through to him after a few days of trying. Actually, right before we were gonna do a second round interview with Joe. And I said, thanks, I'm about to interview Joe. Do you have any thoughts? And he said, yes. In 36 years of being on the Waterloo Board of Education, Joe is the best superintendent that I have worked with. So that was Mr. Brian Pusateri of the Waterloo Board of Education. So I want to also say that our search committee. We are aware of his full service and record as a superintendent across many districts, and we have done our due diligence. And the 14-person hiring committee recommended him without reservation. So at this point, I'm gonna open us up for public comment because this is an action item. And so are there any public comments before we take action? Would you please recognize her?
Hi,
Hi, Diane.
hi. I would just like to say, welcome, Dr. Clark. And just had a couple of questions. We've gone through some upheaval in our district, and I just wondered what drew you to this position, and what do you see as kind of your priority as you join the district and help us to move forward? Thank you and welcome.
Thank you very much, Diane. And I will remind the public that next week, same place, same time, we're having our first community forum. And we're both very much looking forward to hearing from Dr. Clark on that occasion. And also questions like the one that was just raised are going to be open for discussion. Do we have any other public comments? All right, I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign the contract that has been negotiated with Dr. Joe Clark.
I move that the board chair sign the contract with Dr. Joe Clark.
Second.
Laura makes the motion. Austin seconds. Do we have any discussion? All right, we're gonna do a roll call, since we have a couple people remote. So I will start with, Emily.
With great enthusiasm, I say aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Dan,
Yes.
Jen,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Austin,
Aye.
and I also vote aye. The motion passes. So I will sign that contract. And Dr. Joe will start at 5:01 PM on Friday. And he has said that if there's a sports event on that night, he'll be there. And I just want to reiterate, next week, come to the central office and we'll have the full quorum of the board. We'll have Dr. Clark here and we'll have a good discussion both of the superintendent and also about the budget. We want to hear from the community about how we should think about the budget number.
Just to say, I don't think that Dan and Michelle will be here next week, just to confirm.
Yes, we will still be in full
Oh,
quorum,
yes, yes, okay.
but
Yeah.
Dan and Michelle won't be here.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And at this time, I would like to extend the board's sincere appreciation and thank you to Kristen Romick, who took up the responsibility of the superintendent post in time of need for the district. We greatly appreciate both all of your service to this district over 20 years and also stepping up at this time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Kristen. I know it wasn't easy. And we do really, really appreciate it. We could not have done it without you.
I
So thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you so much for helping with the search.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Welcome, Joe.
Great. Any other board discussion on what just happened on the interim superintendent search? Any other comments? No? Okay, so we will now move to the next agenda item. which is a discussion. This is our third discussion of an amendment to our policy governance structure. The South Burlington School Board uses something called policy governance. The purpose of policy governance is to define what the school board should do and shouldn't do. And the way it works is that we set up some ends, some goals for the district. And then we hire a superintendent to meet those goals. And then we lay down some rules about what the superintendent can't do to meet those rules. And those are called executive limitation. And so when we discuss an amendment to policy governance, sometimes we're talking about amending the ends, sometimes we're talking about amending the executive limitations to meeting those ends. In this case, it's about the executive limitations. And so this policy amendment is, again, on our third reading, it is very small. And it is in the section that relates to the communication between the superintendent and the board. And there are 9 other bullet points in this executive limitation, and they're all in our policy governance. I'm not going to read them out right now. But the amendment that we are discussing is just this. The superintendent shall not prevent faculty and staff from communicating with the board regarding matters of public concern, including district policies, procedures, and budgets. So this is in some ways reinforcing a right that already exists under the First Amendment and various Supreme Court cases that say that basically anything that is of public concern is fair game, and the employee cannot be retaliated or disciplined against for bringing it up. But we felt that it was important to state that clearly in our executive limitations, that there could be no gag orders or instructions to the contrary when it came to, for example, a district employee offering opinions to the board during public comment about school consolidation, budgetary allocation, all of those things, which normally we would hope would come up through the superintendent. Nevertheless, sometimes I believe, sorry, the board hasn't passed this. I believe need to be protected from any kind of gag order. So it's open for discussion now on the board.
Do we need to read it again or?
Sure, I can read it
Show
again.
it
Yeah.
for everyone?
Well, it's really short. It used to be longer and now it's really short. It's just the superintendent shall not prevent faculty and staff from communicating with the board regarding matters of public concern, including district policies, procedures, and budgets. Dan, Michelle, Emily, any thoughts?
No,
Seamus, can you direct me to where I can find that latest version? I'm looking at one that was from August 7th. That's
Yes.
much longer.
Sure, I'll share my screen. Let me do that.
Linked in the agenda.
It is linked in the agenda.
Yeah.
Just give me a minute to get connected here.
Thank you. I got the link. Thank you for letting me know.
Seamus, in this discussion, are we editing this text or approving or rejecting it?
we can edit, we can't approve or reject it, but we could definitely edit it. Say it's a terrible idea, say we never wanna talk about it again. Make it twice as long. Clarify it, anything.
Can I move on?
Yes, please.
I have said this from the beginning, and I appreciate the fact that you stated that it's already a right that folks have, and I also believe that we have it in other areas. I do believe it's redundant, and obviously you won't take action however you choose. I feel like it's already there, and I'm not clear. I'm not sure the need for this, so that's just something that I've shared previous to this and just want to make sure that I'm sharing it again.
And if you don't mind, I'm gonna ask a question about that, which you don't have to answer.
Yeah.
But, if you saw an email from a superintendent of our district that instructed a district employee that they were not to discuss, district policies with the school board. And if they did, they would be subject to termination. Would that surprise you?
Yes.
And I don't mean to surprise you, but I do have a physical copy of email that says exactly those things. And I know that
Yeah.
what you're not involved in that in
Yeah.
any way, but that's the concern that gave.
That was the impetus for this.
But what I also will say is regardless of what's there are protections in place. And so, if you have that information, then as a board, you would act on that information. So I feel like there's protections already in place, and so I just go back to my original comment is that I don't understand the reason to have this when we have other things in place already. So that's just, again, where I'm standing
I
with that.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
The way I interpret what you're saying is that you think that if it was adjudicated, however that might happen, that it would resolve in favor of the employee. But I think that one of my primary concerns, one of the reasons that we brought this up to begin with, is to defend the culture and defend to defend morale and to avoid a chilling effect. And a chilling effect is where, essentially things are threatened without actually being acted upon, and those threats cause people to change their behavior. You see chilling effect in art when, First Amendment rights are infringed on. And so I agree with you about how this probably would have ended up if it had come to it, in terms of the public concern defense. But I think that the knowledge that such gag orders had ever been given could lead employees to not bring things up in the first place. And I believe that matters of public concern are, especially around budgetary things in these difficult times when we're having to consider things like school consolidation, and other things. It's just very important that we do hear the dissident voices, we do hear the minority report.
So how will this be different than what's already in place?
The reason this is different is because, it's a written policy that by putting people's attention on it, I think our staff will notice that the board is saying, we give our superintendent wide latitude, but in the same way that they're not allowed to hire people from their family, they're also not allowed, without our permission, they're also not allowed to tell employees not to show up for public comment. So that's the difference. It's just, we want to call attention to the issue. Like if all we were doing was writing this down and not telling anybody, I agree, it would not do anything. But by calling attention to the issue, I think that's where the benefit lies.
I also have a question or a clarification. So in the example that you gave, Seamus, should the person who received such an email believe they have cause for grievance or whatever the formal term is, what is the actual process? And specifically, I'm looking for clarification of who decides in that case.
You mean who decides what is public concern? Or who decides?
Well, what is the process for somebody who receives an email that they, feel as if it wasn't fair and possibly threatening from the leader of the organization? What is their process, right? So I guess ultimately what I'm getting at is, are they in a position where if they want to pursue any kind of remedy, do they have to hire an attorney? If the concern is that the person to whom they're submitting the complaint is actually the arbiter of the complaint.
Yeah, I would like actually to ask you if you happen to know, it's not your friend, you have other focuses as the supports, but if you have a answer to that, otherwise we don't have an official answer for that,
So
Michelle.
so
I can't-
are you asking what the process is now, or are you asking what the process will be with 2.9?
No, what's the process?
Yeah, so the process now is that you can file a complaint, you have HR, which is where folks typically go when they take issue, that they would file a complaint with HR.
But HR
And-
reports to the superintendent.
Yeah, HR reports to the superintendent, and I think if there were concerns that were specific to the superintendent, there would be, again, I don't have the exact terminology or the exact information in front of me, Michelle, but they would share that information we have an executive team. So there's myself who's an executive, there's the director of curriculum who's an executive, and I don't know if that's in writing, but it's always been the thought that we're an executive team who helps support making those decisions. So if that information were to come and people would be concerned, I also think, I guess in my mind, Michelle, the superintendent is expected to lead the district, and there's a level of what your expectation would be in regard to, just let me finish for 1 second, just in regard to what they would do. I then think it would be up to the board as their employer to make decisions if they were, if they felt that wasn't what was happening.
Okay, well, I guess 2 comments after that, and then I'll be done. All of those people on that executive team also report to the superintendent,
That's
just to
correct.
point that out.
Yep.
And the other comment is that I'm not actually hearing clarity on process, because I do keep hearing, we have a process, this is redundant. But I'm not actually hearing a process. I'm hearing kind of a vague reference to a process. If
And
that
Michelle-
is true, then
No,
I just want to, go ahead.
I didn't prepare Kristen. I didn't say, Kristen, be prepared to answer questions about this. So if Kristen doesn't know the exact wording of that's my fault, not her fault.
I think Daisy's on too, just in case if you wanna, it sounds like she might have something to add. Yeah, you can, oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Yes, of course, yes, please allow Daisy to speak. But maybe Michelle, finish your point. I just wanted to make it clear that I have not asked Kristen to defend this or prepare for your questions. So if she doesn't have the answer, it's not her fault. But please continue, Michelle, and then we'll hear from Daisy, and then Jen, and then Austin.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And that's why I was asking the question. And I'm trying to recall I think I was just going to end with, if those assumptions that I'm making, which I want to be clear that I'm making an assumption based on what I've heard so far. And I've been listening to not just this meeting, but past meetings. And I hear that said a lot. And then I hear the comment that this doesn't this doesn't add anything to existing policy. It's redundant. I'm not convinced it is. And I just want to, I guess, state that I do agree with Seamus's comment that it just makes it very clear at a minimum. And to me, that is, it's important. So I do support the language and moving forward. I know we're not taking a vote.
Yeah. Daisy, would you, just to fill in, to see if, in answer to Michelle's question, Daisy has any more information, can you, allow her to speak? And Daisy Brayton is our HR director.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the general complaint form that is in policy, that is in the policy and procedure, I'm sorry, I'm trying to look it up on the email as we're talking, or excuse me, on the policy and procedure page. The general complaint form policy states that it follows the chain of command, and then it goes to the superintendent. And I apologize, I'm in my car and someone's driving with a loud radio. Yes, so then it also comes to me, and in the past, they've also gone to the board directly. In the past, if the complaint was regarding the superintendent, it went to the attorney and the board.
Thank you, Daisy. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that part of the impetus of this also was that we could not put our hands on something specific, as Michelle had just said, that there was this clarity, that there was protection from other policies or processes there. What I could find is in that policy, it's policy D6, and it really pertains more to like protection against harassment of employees, but this may not necessarily fall under that. So I guess the point is, I think we have some work to do in this space to have that real line of clarity as to how employees' rights are protected. And so until we can get there, I believe that this is very important to have.
Austin?
I fully support the simplification and the intention of this. I support the openness of it. I think there's it might be a little too broad or open, and I'm wondering if there are things we can clarify. One, matters of the public concern is a big, broad term, and I don't want to specify that. The board is going to hear matters relevant to our governance, right? What we're our purview. And I'm curious if it's important to specify the format of receiving that communication. And if there is another policy that we could reference specifically and say in keeping with the existing policy. I support the simplification of this. It's easier to read. I support the intention of it. If there are one or two things that we could add some specifics to that would make it more actionable and in a clear way.
Or in thoughts on?
No thoughts.
I have
No comments, Robin.
I have a couple thoughts just based on what everybody's been saying. First of all, in terms of defining this, more broad or more tightly than public concern. I, at least as the board chair, don't want to be the police of free speech. And so when somebody's giving a public comment, I don't want to be in the position of determining in that moment whether what they're saying is appropriate or not, right? That's my concern with beyond simply stating public concern. And then I would say in general, there's two reasons for doing this. On the one hand, it's to avoid the chilling effect. And on the other hand, I can't even remember what the other reason is, but that by itself, just avoiding the chilling effect, seems to me to be such a strong reason for it that I believe it should be considered for adoption at a future board meeting.
Yeah, and I'm just looking, I did see in the procedures to Daisy's comment, it's procedure I1 for the administrative complaint process. And, I'm looking at this, and this is from October 21st, 2008. So I feel like there's a significant opportunity for us to provide some clarity to this and to tighten these up. So there may be this idea that, oh, well, there's other protections and it's out there and there's processes that cover it. But again, I think we need to tighten some of this stuff up. And until we can do that, I'm very supportive of this.
I apologize for my lapse there. I did remember the other reason to do this, and that's just to redress an imbalance of power not necessarily only for the staff, but also for the superintendent to avoid them going into situations where they might make an error that they regret later. And so, for example, in the specific case that I know about, it was, what I would personally call a gag order was issued. And then the employee said, I want to talk to my union rep. And then the super said, no, this isn't disciplinary, even though in the previous email, this person had said, actually, this is subject to termination. And so therefore, I'm denying your right to bring in your union steward in this situation. And the imbalance of power and the creation of a situation where a superintendent might make a mistake like that, let's just take that off the table. Let's just make it so that you can't tell employees not to talk at a public comment, and I think that that'll help everybody, in this situation.
I think that
There
was
any
an
other-
excellent clarification. Thank you, Seamus.
Any other comments on this, or shall we move on? All right, thanks, everyone, and I very much appreciate that you're helping us develop the strength of the argument for and against, so thank you for your comment. The next item on the agenda is the acting superintendent's report. So I should clarify, Joe, once I sign the document, we are also waiting for authorization from the contract is contingent on approval from the Secretary of Education. And so, Kristen is still our acting superintendent. And so with that, I'll turn it over to her for and I very much apologize. I forgot there was another discussion item on here. Snuck up on me. So yes, when we do hear the acting superintendent's report, which will be after the next item, I just wanted to clarify that Kristen is still the acting superintendent. But before we move on to that, I apologize, I missed this. In the agenda, we have a discussion item on the concept of community committees. And so what the board is to discuss is what community committees are, how to run them, and what kinds of community committees we might want to have, and all that stuff. So maybe Jen, I think this was coming from your idea, so can you give a presentation on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't really have much of a presentation, but I think the point here was we wanted to discuss the concept of committees or subcommittees, which would be opportunities for the public to engage with the board in a more formalized manner on a variety of topics that may include, these were just ideas, academic and student support, community and family engagement, extracurricular and enrichment, safety and community well-being, or other topics that could be identified by the community. And so the thought was we would add it to the September 17th community forum and envision that as an opportunity to just gauge the public's interest in forming such committees as a means of providing feedback to board.
Yeah, and I would say, I'd love to see a budget committee and the superintendent search.
Yes.
So those would be my votes, because those are coming up, because I think community input will be really, really important. Not just here and not just in the forums, but like another night set aside specifically for budget.
Agree.
Yeah, so I'm just adding to your list.
Yeah, I agree. And, in talking with Ally the other day,
Yeah.
she had also suggested, having student committees.
Yeah.
Specific student committees that feed up through Ally and Moment. So I think just the goal here is just more engagement from the community. And I think people might be more keen to engage if they have an avenue and channel to do that they may be interested in.
And if I could play devil's advocate for a minute, how will you keep the committees from getting into operational issues that are rightly the superintendent's purview? Like in policy governance, one of the rules that it sets up is that the superintendent is in charge of how the school is operated, and the board is in charge of, like I said, the ends and the executive limitations. So, can you talk to me about how the committees will work with policy governance?
Not yet.
You know, and if we have a budget committee, I mean, this is fairly standard practice, we just help advise the board, just like. We had this great process finding Dr. Joe, we followed the process, we had community input, so. I think if it's clearly defined out of operations, as you say, if the board's just looking for input. So we definitely want community input, when we
Yeah.
do the permanent search, we definitely want the input on budget. The other issues that Jen mentioned, I don't know how to stay out of operations for that,
Yeah.
so, but anyway, I'm not saying it wouldn't work, but. So,
I agree with you 100%. Budget, superintendent search. The balance of output is recommendations, and we try and distinguish that from operations. The board is receiving assembled material.
Well, and I mean, even if it is that you have committees that are collecting information and saying like, hey, this is what I want, just as an example, student enrichment. These are things that we want. And even if they can bring that forward and have a common voice and they can present that information. You know, I mean, it's not that the board is gonna necessarily act on it, but it is a mechanism for, you know, collecting that feedback from the community, right?
This does remind me that when we approved our public participation policy, one of the things that it gave us. That it suggested that we do is like write down on the website who's in charge of things, you know? Cause like I was confused about like, if I have a curriculum question, who do I talk to? And the answer is the superintendent. I mean, in many cases, the answer is the superintendent, but in some surprising cases, apparently the case was the school principal or your teacher. So, it's a broad, like you're saying, the goal is a broad increase in community engagement, and we can do that through committees. We can do that through better explanation of like how you provide feedback, where you get answers and all that stuff. So I like that.
And I do think and hope that once we have Dr. Joe, that's, you know, up here and part of this team. That we can learn and harness some of his ideas for what's worked well in different districts where he's worked. In engaging the community, and maybe there's other ideas here, or we can grow on these things, or.
and the other, this, I don't know if this would involve the community, but like a labor relations committee, which I think would be really good, like couple of board members, head of HR, and the union leadership to meet once a month to keep the lines of communication open, and I don't know if that would involve community members or not. I've never done it. I just got that idea from. But I do think. I think more communication, not less, is better.
I think one of the things you'll want to be careful about is that historically committees are made up of folks who have the ability to attend committee meetings, and that we have to be mindful about our historically marginalized populations, because we don't want to just hear the loudest voices, we want to hear everybody's voice. And so I think that that's something that we just need to be really mindful of, is when these committees are happening and how they're, you know, again, I also want to ensure that we are being mindful of what will be in the purview of the interim superintendent, the superintendent, you know, that's going to be really important. And I think as clear as we can make that for people, because I think sometimes when folks feel like they have said information, if they don't feel like that being heard doesn't necessarily mean that a decision is made in the way you want that decision to be made. And so being clear on what is something we can take action on and what is something we can provide input to will be really important.
Yeah, and I do think we can do a better job there, Kristen.
Yeah, I agree.
I think there's a lot of room for growth.
Yeah.
Dan, Michelle, Emily, any thoughts?
I'm generally in favor of committees ad hoc, or I know we're not actually. I think our policy governance does not allow standing committees. I could make a pitch for those at some point. But in terms of the ad hoc committees and their ability to support engagement with the community, I think it's a great idea. And I really appreciate Kristen's comment there as well about, you know, we do tend to have louder voices and quieter voices and silent voices. And if we're very careful about how we construct those committees and invite participation, it could actually work in favor of giving greater voice to folks who may not be attending all of the meetings and, broaden the engagement. And I think that can only be good. But one comment I do want to make about committees, the question about how do you avoid interfering with the superintendent's leadership role of operations? And I guess and I could be wrong, but from my perspective, I don't see that as a risk, because committees by design aren't about making decisions. They're about exploring ideas, exploring special topics, and providing at most recommendations. I think Austin mentioned that. So it just, even if it comes to operational matters, curriculum matters, whatever, it's input. It's not a decision. It's not a directive. Thanks.
I just wanted, before Dan or Emily, I wanted to clarify something Michelle said. She said our policy governance doesn't allow standing committees. And what that means, if I understand it, is basically just that we can't create a permanent committee. We always have to have a determined start and end to a committee. And that's just because of the rules that we've written for ourselves.
I
Dan?
fully support that. I think personally, I would advocate that we keep that rule and we add committees based on the feedback that we need.
Dan, Emily, any thoughts?
I don't
would-
have anything to add. Thank you.
I also really think that Kristen's point about making sure that the committees are representative. For me, I think that also means including non-school community members in the committees, ensuring that we have broad representation of the taxpayer base. That will really help us guide the district in a way that they want. So all for being careful about getting wide representation in committees. Any further discussion on this topic? Great. Now we'll have the acting superintendent's report. Thank you, Kristen. Great. So this is about new social media restrictions imposed by Act 72 of 2025.
Yeah, thanks. And I feel like Moment and Ally had questions in regard to Instagram, for instance, and that was, I think, part of what kind of started this conversation. So I appreciate that from you all. And Bridget Burkhart is here, and I was hoping to pick her brain before we met tonight, and that's on completely my fault. I ran out of time before I was able to connect with her, so I'm really glad that you're in the audience as someone who can help support us. Okay, thanks. And so, just getting your input, I think is really important. Spoke to our principal, Patrick Burke, and he got some input from the VPA. It's not official information, but it's what folks are thinking about. So when we're thinking about Act 72, and whether the idea is to strictly prohibit using social media, like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, for direct communication with students, folks seem to be pretty clear that there isn't to be any direct communication in regard to those social media avenues. I feel like people are pretty clear on that. I think where it gets a little bit murky maybe is if we're using our Instagram account to share information with students, picture day is happening, or just in general information, is that a means for us to be able to continue to communicate? That's where things get a little more murky. The idea is if there are things that have been in existence and it's a way for us to communicate general information, potentially, that would be an avenue that we could continue to use. But then there's also a line of thinking that we're trying to get rid of social media as a means for information, and that we need to find other ways. So if we're not using phones, if we're not using social media as, screens as a way to share information, that we shouldn't be utilizing those areas. There isn't clarity right now, as far as school districts, and I know that BPA is thinking of making a stance that,
What's BPA?
I'm sorry, the Vermont Principals Association, thank you. As well as the Vermont Superintendent's Association is also, trying to get clarity on that. I don't know, Bridget, I don't wanna put you on the spot, but I didn't know if you wanted to speak at
I'm
all
happy to
about it.
have chat for just.
Okay, that'd be great,
Yeah,
thank you.
So, Bridget Burkhardt, representative.
Yes, Bridget Burkhart, representative for Chittenden 8, but all of us from South Burlington all kind of represent South Burlington. I did not write the law, I was a co-sponsor on the law, so others definitely took the lead on it. The real intent behind the law was not to use social media to communicate with students. The idea is that there's a lot of research that's coming out that really points in the direction of social media as one of the big causes of part of the mental health crisis that's going on in schools across the country. There's a movie I would love for all of you to watch. If you ever have time, I can point you in the direction of those resources if you haven't already seen the movie. There are lots of resources that kind of point to this as something that's damaging to the health of schools. And the idea is that we understand folks have kind of already gone on the path of communicating in that way. But it then requires students to be on social media, and then they're fed things by the algorithm, and it's really easy to go down the social media rabbit hole. So for example, in our house, nobody has social media. We just don't allow that for the kids. Adults obviously do, but the kids do not. And they understand what it is. They definitely looked over my shoulder, but I would not want my child to feel like they are missing out on direct messages from the district that are only provided through social media, and therefore they feel like they need to be. Because this happened with cell phones last year, for example. There was, it was not a law, but it was a South Burlington policy that we were gonna go cell phone free. And then immediately in the high school, literally the first day, one of the teachers was like, well, let's pull out our phones and like, let's do this little project together using our phones. And so there are these mixed messages. And so I think whether it was really clearly written in the law, you know, if you go back and read it, the law is a little hazy, right? It says only approved social media, where I know the intent was that it was meant not to be used. And I think where I get hung up is they want to make sure there's an archive of anything that goes out over social media that can't be deleted and that can't be edited. And that's really tricky. I know that because when I was on the board, we had a board Facebook page, and it was really tricky to try to archive all of that, which is what legal counsel told us we needed to do. Like, we needed to save every single post, every single comment that was made on that page. And that gets really messy at a district level if we're trying to archive every single thing that we're communicating. So I know that this is like a big step backward from where we were. I know especially Principal Burke is really trying to meet the kids where they are with social media, or had been, yeah, it's a change. It is, I think the intent really was to sort of pull back from social media entirely. That being said, that law, I've read it many, many times, and it's open to interpretation. And so I think the VPA and the VSA and a lot of the other Vs will have to weigh in on that and see where it goes from here. I will also say that there are some legislators, there's legislative energy behind tightening it up in the next year.
That was my other question,
Yeah.
is will we be getting any more direction, do you think?
So in theory, the Agency of Education is supposed to be taking that law and giving everyone really clear messaging about it. I'm gonna be really fair to the AOE right now. We keep asking them to do more and more and more and more with every bit of legislation that we write. And they do not have the resources to even implement a lot of the stuff that we've already written and asked them to implement. So to be fair to them, they have a lot on their plate right now with the big act that we just passed. So in theory, the Agency of Education should hand down, this is the interpretation of this, and this is what it means, and here's the model policy, and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know how long that will actually take. In theory, those policies are supposed to be in place in 2026 at some point. but I don't know what the AOE schedule is or how schools will go back to it then. So.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't provide more clarity than that. but
No, I
that's-
appreciate that though. Thank you.
Would you mind taking a question from a board member? They have-
Absolutely, yeah.
Are there any questions from board members? Or maybe when you're done with your presentation, if board members have questions?
Well, I mentioned to Kristen as well, the author of the law, my colleague, Angela Arsenault from Williston, who was like one of the main drivers behind the law. She did have a little, email with a packet of information that I can forward along, that's sort of like more resources for districts. Since the AOE is not kind of stepping up, we're sort of feeling that we have to step and bring that back. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the confusion, the confusing piece is that the law doesn't explicitly state that educators can't, post general information on these.
Yeah.
And so that's where there is some confusion. It does say that if a platform is approved, they do want, just to your point, that they want there to be backup, they want there to be a history. And most of our social media platforms don't provide a history of the information. So that was part of it. Again, just that the Vermont Principals Association, the Bs, the Vermont, Superintendent's Association, are trying to, also give their input and figure out where that information, what we do with the information, but right now, there is some gray area.
So if I can just ask or make a comment, I think to calibrate this discussion, it's important to go back and remember what started it. And it was, because I think Ally and Roman had discussed, having perhaps a student rep social media account regarding what was going on with the board, again, just to try to promote that information and connect with the students. I think it's important to just, again, calibrate this discussion, like what precipitated all of this, why we're talking about it right now. And I mean, I think it would be helpful at some point to be able to go back and say, like, what is the direction here? Do they have the blessing of the board to create a social media account?
And then.
Okay, yeah, of the superintendent.
So what we've been doing, and I spoke to Ally, and Moment, I may have spoken to you about this, my mind's a little disheveled at times. But Principal Burke had an idea that wasn't a social media platform, it was my understanding, and he was gonna connect with you and Ally in regard to that. So I do feel like we're trying to circle back to that and ensure that you have a way to connect and communicate with your classmates in regard to, sharing out this information, because we do think it's important. And we're also trying to kind of digest all this information and figure out, I think what we don't want to do is set something up that we shouldn't be setting up, and that in the future we'll then need to just take down. So, and I know that within our school, there's lots of people who have varying thoughts and philosophies on this. So I think we're gonna probably need a little more direction. But again, connecting with Principal Burke would be a great avenue if he hasn't already connected with you.
That's a good segue to a question that I had for Bridget. The law, I guess, says that it doesn't want social media, and so is there any sense of like what we should be using instead? Like what are the things that school board, how should the schools talk to kids if not through social media?
The law doesn't really express that. I mean, my own opinion is email and back to the old fashioned, the old fashioned way of doing it. I know that my kids are getting a lot more email from classmates even, and from their parents sometimes even during the day, because that is the only way really to connect with one another. Maybe not ideal, but it is, I think it puts everyone on a level playing field. So those kids that have social media and those kids that don't have social media are all getting the same information and have the same avenue to communicate with one another.
Yeah, and I don't have an answer for that. I know that, I think it's something that if this is the avenue we go down, we'll have to have some conversation about what that looks like and about how we connect and communicate more with our students. Is it, more opportunities during the day to, have informational sessions, what is gonna be the way? I'm not sure.
Any other, Emily, Dan, Michelle, anything from your end? No, okay, any other questions on, great, well, Bridget, thank you for coming to our meetings, and thank you for
Yeah.
knowing about things like this.
Thanks for letting me put you on the spot, so I appreciate it.
Not at all, my pleasure.
So that is it from that standpoint. The only other thing I just wanna comment on again is to just welcome, Joe, as our new superintendent, and then I look forward to working with you, and I look forward to continuing, my, existing position, on Monday. So that's it, yeah.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is agenda planning. And so, the first, question is for the September 17th meeting, which is a community forum. Which means that the community will be invited to talk back and forth with a full quorum of the board on warned topics. Do we want to add the discussion items to that board meeting? What we have right now for September 17th, there's two topics. Number one, meet the superintendent. Number two, I think it's literally stated as, how should we think about the budget number? How should, given that the budgeting process, I think, begins with the board telling the central office what they should shoot for, we want the community to help us think about what number should we tell the central office. So is there, any other thoughts for the September 17th meeting?
Sounds good.
No,
to me.
I think those are the two by far most consequential topics right now. We give them as much oxygen as we can.
So I think, this week, we as an administrative team met with Hassan or Hassan, I think is actually what their,
Oh, really?
what their name is. I think we've all been calling.
Say you're wrong.
Yeah.
Time to time.
It gave our administrators again another chance to hear the information, to understand what the framework is looking like, what the board's charge is, and then what their charge is. And I think for them having some clarity on numbers and what you all are thinking was one of the things that kind of rose to the top of what our administrators are looking for. I'm gonna look to Nicole and Jean Marie, because they were also at that meeting, to see if there's anything else that you all were thinking in regard to, so the work with it, the 17th being the meeting, is there anything?
Right, it would be
Anything
great in
else?
terms of agenda planning,
Yeah.
it'd be great to even amend the published agenda and add any specific questions that we might have from your side or from Tassant, like, So, and that doesn't have to be now, you could also send me stuff later.
Can we do that through? can we do
Yeah,
that
oh yeah,
through-
it's agenda planning, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
I would just add that, one of the things that we kicked around.
And maybe wait till
Wait,
you
can
can.
wait? Yeah, I was just gonna say, because so people can hear you, that's all.
Sorry,
This is Jean Marie Clark, our Director of Operations
and fine.
and Finance, sorry.
I would add that one of the things we really briefly kicked around with Tacit on Tuesday, I've lost track of the day of the week.
And hold on, just 1 second, is that since we're not warned for talking about the budget itself, let's just talk about like what questions we should ask at future meetings.
Yes. So the idea was, to give the group that's working on the budget potentially 3 numbers to work with. A flat line, a pie in the sky, and a decrease, right? I am new to this finance role, but I've spent a lot of time on your side of the house, and I'm a taxpayer in this state, and so all of what is happening in our state, I think, brings caution to me as we look at our budget and the future that's to come. And so, I think that will be a very new experience for South Burlington, trying to work with a trimmed budget potentially. And there are a lot of drivers outside of our control, health insurance, for example, that have a very big impact on our budget, and so we have to counterbalance those with the other expenses that are on our budget, and the requests from our community of how they want us to steward.
So I hear a few questions in there that we might be able to add to the agenda for people to think about. So if you would send me maybe some thoughts of, you know,
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
that would be great.
And I'll be here the 17th.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts for, you know what, I'm gonna pull up well, actually, no, the point of community forums is that we don't have regular business, we don't have a consent agenda, we don't have discussion items, we don't have action items. We only have discussion with the community, so there's really nothing else to talk about on the agenda. The only things on the agenda are meet the superintendent and talk about the budget.
That's
Are
awesome.
we good?
Yes, I think that's great. Perfect.
It's a warned meeting though.
It's a warm meeting, full quorum of the board and there.
I'm just thinking about, approval of, AP vouchers, like normal
No,
business.
we're not
that-
doing that though.
You won't do that? on the
No, we're gonna
17th?
do that tonight. We shouldn't be talking.
Oh, we can talk about that, yeah.
No, okay.
It's on the agenda.
No, but I mean, I just didn't know if Jean Marie should be up here, so.
Oh, Jean Marie Clark asked whether we would be approving AP orders and doing other consent agenda stuff in the September 17th meeting. My opinion is that if you guys need it, feel free to add it to the agenda and we'll do it at the end. Because it doesn't really disrupt. The main idea of the community forum was to not have,
That's my understanding of community forum is that, no, that's all, the formal business meeting is not there.
It's a special meeting, I think we need to, my recommendation would be to stick with the agenda items you want to have on there as items that you're gonna discuss with your.
so no consent agenda. you're
Yeah, I would
saying.
say.
Okay, that's fine. So no consent, great. And any other future agenda items, in terms of meetings going into October?
We need to put the fiscal report, the Monville report on, we changed that from September, and so we wanted to add that to one of our October meetings. And so I wanna just make sure that that doesn't fall off our radar, because that was one of the monitoring reports that needed to be done. So, we moved that from September, and we'll wanna put that on.
Okay, would you please draft the next agenda
Yeah.
and then put that on there? So this will be for a meeting in October.
The next agenda, do you want me to draft the agenda for the 17th or?
No, for
or the
October
October-
8th, I think. it
Okay,
is.
yep, absolutely.
Yeah, the 17th meeting is already warned.
Yeah.
It's already, or it's already, a draft agenda's already been
Yep.
put out there.
And so we just need to finalize that, and if we can finalize that by tomorrow, we can make sure that that gets out,
Okay, great.
so that would be great.
Any other thoughts on agenda planning? So one thing I will note that is that we did not add a third item to the community forum to talk about committees. Do we want to leave that for a future community forum? Do
I
we wanna
would
talk-
like to have it, because I think that it's, I mean, particularly with the budget coming up, I think that in the permanent
For budget
superintendent search coming up, again, I would imagine it's not gonna be more than a 10-15 minute, 10-minute discussion perhaps, like, is there an appetite for this, and what would these committees potentially look like? I think that's just to, again, solicit feedback from the community if there's interest there.
Okay.
What is that?
The budget committee.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will add we'll add a third topic at the end. And time permitting, or maybe we don't have to say that, but like time permitting, we'll talk about committee.
Okay, so other topics looking forward beyond this, I do think that hopefully we will have the opportunity to talk about committees, and I think we will need to formulate how exactly we'll be moving forward with that. I think also at some point, it would be helpful to plan a retreat or some kind of event with the new superintendent. I think we need to also talk about VSBA training.
Or training.
I think we need to talk about an audit of our monitoring reports. I think our policies, I think would be a good thing for us to do. I think we also, other topics need to have somewhere on our radar and start putting together a schedule for launching our permanent superintendent search. And last thing, and I don't want this to fall off because it keeps kind of dropping off the end, is our scorecard. Whether, where we're mapping that back and that could be something that we could do in concert with any audit that is going on, so that we can see how things are shaking out.
Can you send me?
Yeah.
That list and your suggestions for which, in the next few meetings, which of them should go in which? Any other agenda Dan, Emily, Michelle?
What
Yeah.
Jen said.
No, nothing.
All right. Moment.
Nothing big on me.
Alright. Okay, so our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. And you said you had a,
I do, so we have, with the permission, I'll skip the approval of AP orders and go to hires. I'm okay with you. So I need to remove Allison Croce. She decided not to accept the contract, so that's on there, and I just need to, sure that I let you know that she's decided not to do that. Sarah Betsy Johnson is a 1.0 FTE school nurse. She is being hired to fill the resignation of Darcy. And then Vincenza Lundy was hired as a 0.40 FTE music teacher. The position was posted as a 0.6. At the time, she felt she could only accept a 0.40 position, but has since stated that she's able to accept the 0.6. So I have an amended contract. It actually shows that it'll be the 0.4 that she's accepting, and then we'll also have her accept a 0.2. So for the total of a 0.6, but it little unclarity there, and I just wanted to make sure that she is accepting a 0.6. We'd like to be able to afford her that opportunity. It was what it was posted for, and she's now able to accept that. So that's the hires. And then there's the AP orders.
does anybody have any questions on the AP orders? No. Okay. Forgive me, I forget this every single time. Do we have to take a motion to approve the consent agenda?
We do.
Okay, all right. And if there were items on it that were more than 50, we'd have to take a special one.
Correct,
Oh,
but that
right.
specific order.
Okay, great. So I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
So Laura moves to approve and Austin seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I,
Great. All right,
So one thing, sorry, I should have brought this up before, but, so I had met with Kristen and Delina, was it last week or was that 2 weeks ago?
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
Was it 2 weeks ago?
Mhm.
And so we drafted up the template for a potential agenda. So I wanted to know if there was any thoughts on board's decision to accept something like that or modify something like that, but it's been out there and it's kind of hanging.
okay, so that's a reminder to the board, and maybe you'll send a reminder email with the links. To provide comments back to me only about the agenda, the proposed agenda template.
Okay.
All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, Laura moves to adjourn the meeting and Austin seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.